everybody. So the Biden-Harris climate team is already taking massive action on US climate goals. So there are a lot of awesome things happening, right? But it can also be a lot to digest and understand what all of these technical climate terms actually really mean. So here in Maine, I keep trying to get the name of this river right. Passagassawakeag, right? And so I imagine that some of these US climate initiatives might sound kind of like that for a lot of people. So while the JOLA team is doing a fantastic job of sharing their historic climate plan with the world, today what I'm going to do is take their biggest climate headlines and break them down a couple steps further, translating them into simple everyday terms, make it more relevant to you, ultimately empower you to engage in the climate conversation. All right, so come on in, let's go. All right, so here we are in 2021, which will go down in history as the start of the American clean energy revolution. Kind of like 227 years ago in 1793, when the Industrial Revolution started, when a man of 25 years old named Samuel Slater started his first textile factory in Rhode Island. All right, now here's a little known fact about how the Industrial Revolution started. Samuel's factory wasn't powered by coal or anything, right? In fact, it was actually powered by renewable hydropower. So this clean energy revolution that's starting right now is actually more like a clean energy revival, right? Just going back to America's original use of renewable power. Why is this clean energy revolution or revival happening, right? I kind of think we're beyond the why at this point, right? I mean, Biden on January 27 said, we can feel this in our bones. And I think a lot of us just feel that implicitly, like there's no question, right? But I do want to share a photo that gets to the heart of the global why. And it's a photo that we just don't often see, that I first saw at a 2019 climate reality training with Al Gore. So check it out. What you're seeing there, the little blue line, is the entire atmosphere. That's it, right? I mean, like when you're standing on the ground, right, and you look up at the sky, it just seems infinite, right? But that little blue line, the atmosphere, is only 60 miles wide. That's it. So if you were to take a road trip through the atmosphere to the edge of space in the all-new electric Jeep, of course, going 70 miles an hour, it would only take you 51 minutes to drive through the entire atmosphere. I mean, didn't you kind of think it would take a little longer to drive to space? No, now when it's only 60 miles wide. All right, now to show you just how thin the atmosphere is in a different way, I thought I'd show you this experiment that I got from NASA involving a basketball. All right, so pretend this is Earth, right? And then you get a piece of plastic. Put the ball in the plastic. So this plastic represents the atmosphere. This is the size of the atmosphere relating to the rest of the globe. Yeah, that's it. That's all we got. Now there's one more why I want to clarify, which is the 1.5 degrees. We hear a lot about the 1.5 degrees, right? But I think this might be the least understood climate term, which actually means that it's one of the most confusing climate terms. The Paris Agreement is an initiative among countries globally to prevent global warming from increasing 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050. It's kind of hard to grasp the enormity of it. In summer, when the temperature goes up 1.5 degrees or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, which is what it equates to, you don't really feel any difference, right? So the 1.5 degree we're trying to prevent is actually a global average increase across the entire Earth compared to the globe's pre-industrial levels before Samuel Slater started his textile factory. And the reason you'll keep hearing about this 1.5 degree number is that it actually represents a tipping point at which all of the climate effects we're seeing today go from destructive to catastrophic and irreversible. All right, so how is this all going to happen, right? Well, let's talk about those $2 trillion. So Biden's going to invest $2 trillion in massive climate initiatives that will enable America to meet several US climate goals over time. But that's a lot of cash and it's totally hard to visualize, so I thought I'd try to contextualize it like this instead. Guess what else is worth $2 trillion? Yep, Apple. And what is Apple? It is everywhere. It's an American fundamental that 1 out of every 2.5 households uses in the US. So just think about these $2 trillion as what will enable us to get on a path to having clean energy becoming an everyday American fundamental. All right, so let's first break down Biden's biggest climate headline and the ultimate goal that we're trying to reach, which is net zero emissions by 2050. This goal is kind of like the Super Bowl of climate. So I'm changing this goal to be called America's first ever climate bowl. All right, but net zero emissions can be just a little hard to grasp at first. And I'm gonna give you 3 reasons why and break it down, make it a little easier. Number 1, net zero is just not a word we use a lot. I mean, net zero, when do we ever use that? Number 2, emissions is just really weird to say. It really just doesn't roll off the tongue, you know? And number 3, 2050. I mean, 2050 just sounds so far away. So here's how to translate this whole thing. All right, so we know that net worth is a person's total worth, right? And I think we're also good with the term net result, right? Meaning the total result of something. So net zero just means total zero. And what's the total of zero? Just zero. Now emissions, every time you hear emissions, just think pollution. Same 3 syllables. Emissions, pollution. Phonetically, it's easier to go from zero pollution to zero emissions. Yeah, there's definitely like a switch in there that you have to do when you go from 0 to E. Because zero pollution doesn't require a change in position of the tongue muscle way back there. Net zero emissions in its simplest form just means zero pollution. Right, but now keep in mind that zero pollution doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't any pollution or that humans won't be emitting pollution. Instead, it means that any pollution that does occur will then be permanently removed from the atmosphere. So it's the trees and the kelp and the peat moss that are naturally removing carbon or pollution or emissions from the air, while carbon removal technologies are being created to capture or permanently destroy the carbon. You know how sustainable kelp is? It actually grows up to 2 feet per day. That's awesome. So to put zero pollution in context of your everyday life, right? Imagine making coffee, driving to the grocery store. Imagine all of those activities are powered by clean, renewable energy, so zero CO2 is generated in the first place. Now imagine all of your friends and colleagues and everyone you know on Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter. Imagine everything they do has a zero carbon footprint, meaning it produces zero carbon, zero pollution. Now think back to that last sports game you went to with thousands of actual real fans that drove actual real gasoline powered cars to get there. And now imagine all of that exhaust being magically sucked out of the air or destroyed right there in the spot or turned into usable ultra low carbon fuels. Dude, yeah, I mean, that science is actually now being created and tested along with a whole bunch of other super innovations, because winning the climate bowl is going to take that kind of Einstein magic that our brilliant American people are capable of creating, which is part of what the $2 trillion is going to support. Woo! All right, let's take a break and check out this beautiful scene. All right, and what's really cool is that the climate bowl is already in the works right now. According to Princeton, who just published this awesome report, there are actually 5 different ways that America can reach net zero emissions or zero pollution by 2050. And why I love their report is that it actually shows how this net zero 2050 goal can be achieved in every single state. It even, shows you like on maps, like how everything could actually be accomplished. And as Princeton's Eric Larson says, their report makes a net zero future vivid and real for people. Yes! So let's break down the second headline, which is to decarbonize the power sector by 2035. The first time I heard that, I was like, what? It's just like such a mouthful, right? And it sounds so technical. Now, the Biden climate team is also calling this the carbon pollution free power sector by 2035, which is better. But instead of those 2 headlines, I'm just gonna break this down into a really simple 3-letter acronym, and that is FFP. And I'm gonna tell you right now how I got there. First, take decarbonize, right? It's kind of like net zero. We're not quite used to saying it yet, and everyone will be, everyone's using it, right? But what we are used to saying and what we're familiar with is fossil fuel. So to decarbonize just really means to de-fossil. In its simplest form, instead of a fossil fuel, it means it's fossil free. It just makes it a little easier in our brain. All right, so fossil free, FF. And power sector, but it just means the power plants that are then generating electricity. So just think that power sector just means power. just means the power we use, right? And so now we got P, so fossil-free power. So decarbonize the power sector by 2035. Just forget that. It's just fossil-free power. FFP by 2035. Hey, Gina. And I know renewables today only make up about 18% of the United States' total electricity generation. But that is changing very fast. Yeah, so the federal government just came out with a statement that says that of all the new power that's going to be added to the grid this year in 2021, 70% of that will be renewable fossil-free power. And why is this? Simply because it costs less to generate power now from clean sources like wind and solar compared to what it costs to generate power from stuff we gotta frack out of the ground. Ah, yes, but then there is natural gas. Now, isn't it supposed to be cleaner? That's just false advertising from the oil and gas industry. Let's get this really clear. Natural gas is not a cleaner fossil fuel. Natural gas produces less CO2 than coal, but it still blasts methane into the air, which traps 28 times more heat in the atmosphere than CO2. Just remember when you're at the pump and you see this, talk is cheap and gas is gross. Which is why Biden shut down the Keystone gas line and is going to create a ton of jobs to plug up all of these gas wells just sitting there abandoned, emitting all of this methane into the air. But he's not banning fracking outright because as coal becomes obsolete, we are going to have to use natural gas as we transition to this fossil-free power future. All right, so back to renewables. I mean, just how are we going to reach this fossil-free power goal in 15 years? Biden's plan calls for the installation of millions of solar panels and tens of thousands of wind turbines, including thousands of offshore jumbo wind turbines. And it is these jumbo offshore wind turbines that will be responsible for generating a lot of this power to meet that 2035 renewable goal. And check it out, this is the world's most powerful offshore wind turbine. Edison would be proud. Yeah, these 13 megawatt turbines have blades that are about as long as a football field or about 10 telephone poles in a row. Most turbines you see on land are 1.5 megawatts or 2 megawatts, which means that one turbine can power about 300 average US homes a year. But with these jumbo offshore turbines, it means that with just one turn of the blades in 7 seconds, it can power one home for the entire day, just one single turn. And these offshore wind turbines are already planned to be installed way off the coast of Delaware, New Jersey, and Maryland, and they're gonna power about 530,000 homes. Okay, now listen, this is not all gonna be la la land, okay? Part of the big problem here with all of this new clean energy generation is in the transmission of all of this new energy across our severely aging electrical grid. Princeton actually said that we're going to need to triple our transmission lines by 2050, but the problem is that it took 150 years to build what we're using now. All right, now to quickly touch on the plan for our 4 million aging and vacant office buildings, which might feel kind of something like this right now. The plan here is to make our office buildings operate more efficiently and therefore pollute less. But the coolest headline here is that these 4 million office buildings equates to 1 million jobs to make that all happen. That's like employing almost every single person that lives in San Jose, right? The 10th largest city in the US. All right, so I saved the coolest part for last, which is Joe and Pete's transportation plan to reinvent the American transport system into the United States of Electrica. So we've already heard that there's going to be a big focus on manufacturing clean and efficient cars and parts right here in the US. And here are two 500,000 figures that are pretty cool. Apparently, the US has 500,000 school buses, and they're all going to be converted to zero pollution or zero emission buses. That's a lot of future party buses. And when we want to drive these buses straight across the country to the gorge, we can, because the United States is also getting 500,000 additional electric car charging stations. So right now, the US has about 28,000. So this is like a 1,700% increase to support all of these electric cars we're going to be driving. But what I'm most excited about, in addition to the electric Jeeps and the Bollingers and the Rivians, is the US railroad revolution. Pete has been talking about a high-speed rail system kind of like our current interstate highway system, but a national train system that takes us all over the country in a train. And if this HSR is anything like Virgin's Brightline train in Florida, we are stoked because this train is clean, it's fast, and a glass of champagne comes with your train ticket. All right, now that was a lot of new info, so here's a recap for your climate conversations. The JOLA team's Clean Energy Revival mission is to protect our globe's tiny 60 from the big 1.5. We're going to achieve fossil-free power, or FFP, by 2035 with jumbo turbines, no gross gas, and lots of jobs. And we're transforming our nation into the United States of Electrica with clean cars and HSRs, all in pursuit of winning America's first ever climate bowl of zero pollution by 2050. All right, guys, well, that's a wrap. I'm gonna have some coffee with Kamala, and I will see you next time. Passagassawakeag.